There have been very few games in my life that have stayed with me the way Ready or Not has. The game is dark, uncomfortably dark. At times, you can listen to the 911 calls in-game and genuinely struggle to tell whether they're real or not. The game draws disturbing parallels to true crime, and some of the events that you see in it almost feel indistinguishable from real life. But that hyper-realism isn't the only thing that makes Ready or Not feel so gritty. It's also the game's story. Throughout our time in Los Sueños, we've fallen deep into a tangled web of crime, corruption, and horror. We've followed everything from drug dealers to sex traffickers, crooked cops to mass murderers, to people that are just plain crazy. This game has a darkness in it that's hard to fathom, and after a while, it's difficult just to keep your head screwed on straight. And that's not even to mention all of the mysteries and things going on behind the scenes in the game that are still unfolding. Lately, it's become clear that there's something else happening in the story of Ready or Not, and the waters here have gotten more muddy than ever before. So today, we're going to be taking a look back at the entire story that we've seen thus far and organize it in chronological order. That way, we can better understand the events of Ready or Not as they actually unfolded. We'll also be covering events that took place before the game itself, building a complete timeline of Los Sueños as well as the personal life of Judge, the game's main character, because in many ways, the stories of both are inseparably linked. Also, just a quick note for clarity here before we get into it, at some points I'll be omitting certain details from some of the maps. While there are plenty of interesting pieces of the evidence in the game, not all of them have a real impact on the overall story. So if you're interested in seeing a full breakdown, I do have a series on my channel that covers every little detail of all the levels in the base game. So if you want to see something like that, please feel free to check it out. But for this video, we're going to be focusing on what actually matters, because Ready or Not's story can get really dense, and it's easy to lose track of what's going on. And my God, do we have a lot of story to talk about. So please, by all means, make yourself comfortable, grab yourself something to drink, and accompany me as we investigate the complete story of Ready or Not. But before we can get into all of that though, allow me to quickly introduce you to today's sponsor, Rocket Money. If you guys are anything like me right now, you've been trying to find as many ways as possible to save as much money as you can. Lately, it seems like everything's just gotten so much more expensive, so managing your finances is really important. And that is where Rocket Money comes in. Rocket Money allows you to track your subscriptions, set budgets, and overall just get a better picture of your finances. Now personally, I've been using it to try and cut back on my spending, and in the short time that I've been using it, it's already saved me $480 a year from unused subscriptions alone. A lot of companies anymore make a living off of charging you for subscriptions that you'll eventually forget about, and Rocket Money is specifically designed to help you combat that. So, if you feel like you're walking around with less money than you should, or you're just looking to clean up on your spending, I'd recommend that you check out Rocket Money today. You can go to rocketmoney.com/Isaac Morgan to get started for free, or you can scan the QR code on screen or click my link down in the description below. Once again, thank you to Rocket Money for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to it. 1990, the Los Sueños Dam and Substation attacks. In 1990, Los Sueños came under siege from several different coordinated assaults. Hydroelectric infrastructure, most notably the Los Sueños Dam, was attacked and partially destroyed by a small team of 3 men. These men presumably planned these assaults long in advance, and other than terrorizing the city, it's unclear what motive they may have had for such an attack. 2 of these 3 men were captured and identified as being former federal law enforcement. Why they suddenly turned toward a life of violence is currently unknown, but as we continue our investigation, the answer to this will become more clear. These attacks would contribute to a power crisis and electrical issues far later down the line, and the ramifications of them are still being felt over 30 years later. Early to mid-2000s, Judge's life pre-LSPD. Prior to joining the Los Sueños Police Department, Judge bounced between the military and several different police forces. His journey began in 2001 in the wake of the September 11th attacks. Like many other young men his age, he saw the attacks as a call to action and enlisted in the military straight out of high school. Before this, he was considered to be a fairly average person. He was mediocre academically and athletically, but he seemed to really find his footing once he had a gun in his hands. During his deployments, Judge lost several of the men that he served with. However, one notable exception was Evan, his platoon leader. Evan was someone that Judge trusted, and he would continue to reappear throughout his life even after their time in the military. After serving his deployments, though, Judge eventually settled down in Chicago, and it was there that he met his wife Elizabeth. By all accounts, the two were a happy couple, and they would even go on to have 3 daughters. During this time, Judge also joined the Chicago Police Department, where he served on their SWAT team. At some point, though, his unit was called out to respond to a mass casualty event in a nightclub, but this operation quickly fell apart, ending with the rest of his team being killed and Judge being the sole survivor. Judge was wounded in this incident, and in the aftermath, he began to show signs of severe survivor's guilt and PTSD. His home life deteriorated, and one night, his wife vanished, taking their children with her. She had told him that he needed to find himself again, and looking for a fresh start, Judge decided to leave Chicago and transferred to a new department in Reno, Nevada. Very little is known about his time there, though. How long he stayed, what he was involved in, or even whether he was officially employed by the department at all. What is clear, though, is that this period marked the beginning of something that would follow Judge for the rest of his life. At some point during his time in Nevada, he encountered his former platoon mate, Evan, now working with the Reno Police Department, but beyond that, his memory becomes unreliable. When questioned about this period, Judge appears confused, defensive, and unable or unwilling to explain what really happened there. The exact year of his transfer to the LSPD is unclear, but what we do know is that he advanced quickly within the department and eventually assumed command of D Platoon. Some accounts suggest that he may have even been fast-tracked by department leadership. Regardless of the reason for this, though, his rise through the ranks was unusually fast, and shortly after his arrival in Los Sueños, Judge would be exposed to a series of events that would push him to his absolute limits. February 3rd, 2025. Thank you, come again. A group of armed men break into the 4U gas station in an attempt to intercept a scheduled cash pickup. The situation quickly escalates, though, resulting in multiple deaths, including that of the store manager. And Judge, recently promoted to squad commander, is assigned to respond. This incident serves as an early indication of the poor state of Los Sueños. The surrounding area shows visible signs of decay, inoperative ATMs, and several protest signs. It also reflects the level of violence in the city, unpredictable and unforgiving. A man and his dog are shot down while they ate. A woman and her child get separated from one another and are both likely scarred for life. Judge and the rest of the squad are able to resolve the situation fairly quickly, but the effects of that night don't just disappear. They ripple through the community. Local news stations report on it, and we can even see where the community holds vigils for the victims. One of the things that Ready or Not does really well is ambient world building. You'll come across references and small details that tie into other events, whether they've already happened or are still to come. And all of these details, no matter how small, make the world feel more alive. Evidence recovered after the incident indicates that at least one of the suspects, Andre Williams, intended to use the money to purchase methamphetamine from local suppliers, referencing a drug ring that we'll encounter later on in the story. April 19th, 2025, Neon Tomb. Roughly 2 months after the gas station incident, LSPD dispatch begins receiving multiple emergency calls reporting something far more serious. A mass casualty event is unfolding at a downtown nightclub. Initial reports indicate several armed men opened fire on the people gathered outside of the venue, before forcing their way inside and barricading the exits. Multiple fatalities have already been confirmed, along with an unknown number of hostages. Shortly after the incident begins, a Yemeni terrorist group known as The Hand claims responsibility, stating that the attack was carried out in retaliation for U.S. drone strikes in Yemen. Now, the US-based cell of this group is believed to be led by a man known as Kadama, and it's believed that this man is inside of the club participating in the attack himself. Witness footage and live streams suggest the presence of multiple other attackers, including at least one individual wearing a bomb vest. The initial panic of the attack can be felt in the several 911 calls that flooded the station.
911, this call is being recorded. What is your emergency?
Help us!
Ma'am, is everything all right? Can you tell me your name?
Oh God, they're shooting everybody! Run! Run! Over here! Over here!
Are you there, ma'am?
Hi! Shit! Oh my God! Yes! Help us! You need to help us! They're shooting us all!
Where are you, ma'am?
Neon! You know, the nightclub! Oh shit, they're coming this way! No, stop! Stay away!
Judge and D platoon are quickly deployed to the scene, but when they arrive, it's a bloodbath. There are piles upon piles of bodies here, with the cell phones of the dead victims creating an eerie cacophony prior to our entrance. This is another thing that Ready or Not does almost too well, a brutal attention to detail. Moments like this are what make these missions hit so hard. When you walk past a body and you hear their phone ringing, you know that there's someone on the other end trying to make sure their loved one's okay, not knowing they're already gone. It makes the stakes here feel real, and as you hear it throughout the level, it reminds you of what's actually at risk here. Inside of the club, though, it seems that the Hand chained off any viable escape routes, and when the panic started and people rushed for the exits, they essentially funneled them into these dead ends. While significant casualties already occurred prior to our arrival, the unit engages the terrorists and ultimately takes Kadama and the other attackers into custody. Roughly 60 people are said to have died in the incident, but without Judge's intervention, that number likely would have been much higher. Still though, this attack would go down as one of the worst acts of terrorism in American history, although it wouldn't be too long before the Hand attempted to surpass this number with another assault. May 8th, 2025, relapse. Following the attack at Neon Nightclub, Kadama was being held at the Alamontes Correctional Facility, where he awaited trial. However, during his time there, he was brutally beaten by 2 correctional officers. These men likely knew someone who was lost in the attack, and used this opportunity to enact their own form of justice on the perpetrator. And although this beating was certainly deserved, Kadama was nearly killed, and he was transferred to the ICU at Coastal Grove Medical Center. Unbeknownst to these prison guards, their actions would inadvertently set into motion an even greater tragedy. You see, intel about Kadama's location leaked, and this information conveniently made its way back to the Hand. The remaining members of the cell quickly began making plans to intercept him while he was being held there. After all, it's a lot easier to break someone out of a hospital than it is a jail cell. Several members of the Hand donned disguises, posing as hospital staff to bypass security, but eventually, it seems that they were discovered, and everything quickly spiraled out of control. The hospital was left lined with bodies, and as a deterrent to any response, the Hand planted explosives all throughout the building. To make matters worse, Coastal Grove Medical Center was severely overcrowded, due in part to the Hand's earlier attack on the nightclub, and as a result, the only available space to house Kadama was in the children's wing. By some miracle, though, all of the children had been evacuated at the time of the attack and were brought to safety. Many of the other patients, though, weren't as lucky. Judge and D Platoon ultimately regained control of the hospital, effectively dismantling what remained of the Hand's US-based cell. But the cost is steep. Civilian casualties are significant, adding yet another scar to a city that's already been pushed beyond its limit. June 1st, 2025, Carriers of the Vine. Less than a month later, another intense situation unfolds that requires SWAT intervention, but this time around, it's a bit stranger. In the early morning hours of June 1st, 2 unidentified women brutally assaulted a man outside of a gun store. CCTV captured the footage of the women's van as they were speeding away, and the license plate number was tracked to one Elaine Raskin. Something worth noting about Elaine Raskin is that she was a former member of the United States Intelligence Agency, the ready or not equivalent of the CIA, but was discharged for unknown reasons. Afterwards, she became the founder of Carried from Crisis LLC, a battered women's shelter. However, lately, it seems that she started to turn these women into extremists. The women of the group now refer to themselves as the Carriers of the Vine, and they're believed to be participating in cult-like rituals. The women are heavily armed and aren't to be taken lightly. 2 LSPD officers arrived to the group's compound to investigate, but quickly came under fire from several masked individuals. The pair wrecked their squad car, with one of them being killed and the other being pinned down by gunfire. Whatever those 2 officers found themselves interrupting couldn't have been good, and needing assistance, they call in Judge and D Platoon to help clean up the mess. As they clear through the compound, though, Judge uncovers some interesting evidence surrounding Elaine and her cult. Firstly, it seems that these women were targeting the men who raped and abused them, either attacking them in public or kidnapping them and bringing them here. In the basement of an old church on the property, there's a makeshift torture chamber, where it's heavily implied that the cult members castrate and kill their abusers. Not only this, though, but since no bodies could be recovered from the site, it's assumed that the 2 officers who made the first call to the compound have also been killed. There are also some references to something much larger happening behind the scenes here, though. Elaine mentions on an audio recording that one of the people they kidnapped had some sort of code scrawled on their back, and that code was only one that another USIA agent would be able to know. It seems that one of Elaine's connections is trying to make contact with her, but who could it be? She goes on to mention that it might be the doing of her old colleague Gerard, but she isn't positive why he'd be reaching out to her. Just then, though, she mentions something strange.
Gerard, maybe? I haven't seen that bastard in, Jesus, must be almost 30 years. Even when I was there, he was a dinosaur. About as old as the building. No way he's still working there. Has he been trying to find other members? The cohorts have been established. There's no more work to do. Either way, we closed that operation after that group struck the dam. Gerard, what the hell are you up to?
Here, Elaine makes reference to some strange operation that the USIA conducted during her time there, but she also says that it was shut down in the wake of the dam attack that we mentioned earlier. These 2 events must be linked somehow. Perhaps the men who attacked the dam were affiliated with the USIA in some way. Regardless, there isn't much left to discover on this map. Once we're back at the station, there's a piece of evidence that seems to shine a bit more light on this project, though, and a bit of light on Judge himself. The document itself is a transcript, dated to Elaine's time with the USIA, and at first, it reads like a standard intelligence briefing. An agent named Brody instructs Raskin to monitor a subject referred to as Gamma 1, a candidate being prepared for insertion into the Los Sueños Police Department. But as the document continues, the tone shifts. The first cohort was a failure. We built monsters and turned them loose into the dark. It's only a matter of time until the mariposas grow and you're hung out to dry. I'll do it right this time, E. Once again, it's suggested that this USIA program had been attempted before, and for whatever reason, something went wrong. Perhaps these failed subjects mentioned in the transcript are the same ones who attacked that dam back in the 90s, but right now, we can't be certain. But then, at the bottom of the transcript, written in red, there's a name, Beaumont, which is Judge's last name. And it's here that it becomes clear that this document is about Judge. Suddenly, his quick promotion to squad leader makes more sense, as his time here is being monitored by the USIA. But what purpose does this experiment serve? Moreover, the E that Agent Brody used to sign off with leads me to think that this other mysterious agent might be Evan, Judge's old friend from back in Nevada. Perhaps Evan was working with the USIA the entire time and was merely scouting for subjects for this experiment, and Judge just so happened to be the lucky winner. Now, at this point, it's still pretty unclear what this USIA project is, what its goals are, and whether Judge even knows if he's a part of it. But pretty soon, a fuller picture of the situation will begin to present itself. August 20th, 2025. Lethal Obsession. Sometime after this, things seemed to cool down in Los Sueños for a bit, and the summer was largely calmer than the months prior. However, that would quickly change on August 20th. LSPD dispatch receives an urgent transmission from the East McCade police station. Multiple officers are down, and there's an immediate request for backup. A man had set fire to a police cruiser outside of the precinct, and when officers approached to investigate it, this man ambushed them, killing 5. The suspect then fled the scene in an RV, eventually making his way to a remote cabin in McCade Falls. The suspect's identity is where things get more interesting, though. His name is Gerard Scott, and he's the same man who served with Elaine Raskin in the USIA. It's unclear why everyone we've seen associated with the agency has been acting violently, but maybe we'll manage to find some answers when we raid his cabin. Now, for reference, Gerard's cabin is a conspiracy theorist's wet dream. The floors are covered in documents, the ceiling is coated with aluminum foil, and all throughout the house are scribblings of conspiracies and all other manner of deranged theories. His basement has even been converted into a makeshift ricin lab, where Gerard is attempting to create an aerosolized form of the toxin, likely to poison unsuspecting targets. However, the most interesting part of the property is Gerard's room. Inside, there's a bulletin board covered in information about this strange USIA project that we saw before. The attached papers and articles mention something called the MLO experiment, which for all intents and purposes seems to be the Ready or Not equivalent to MK Ultra. The experiment here involved dosing unaware subjects with LSD on a daily basis, and while on paper this was said to be done in an effort to help with mental illness and addiction, in reality it was done for a much darker purpose: to create incorruptible agents. Men who would kill at the drop of a hat with not so much as a wink of remorse. What's even more concerning is where these subjects ended up. According to Gerard's findings, many of them were placed into positions of power, law enforcement, politics, and even national intelligence. But now they're disappearing. One by one, individuals connected to the program are either going missing or turning up dead under suspicious circumstances. Even the man who exposed the operation couldn't escape it. A lab assistant named Dr. Pabodi, one of the first to bring details of this project to light, vanished after failing to return from a boating trip. His body was never recovered. Next to all of this, we'll find an audio recording of Gerard, and it's here that Judge is once again mentioned by name.
Judge will come here. You'll have to. It has to be him. I've seen his training, his methods. I know what kind of man he is. Part of the cycle, just like me. A never-ending game. I'll show him when he gets here. Show him that he's the same puppet as me. Trapped in the same sick play.
It seems that everything Gerard did here, from the shooting to the ricin attacks, was done in a deliberate effort to lure us here, to show us this. Based on the evidence in front of us, it seems that Judge was a test subject of this MLO experiment. Maybe that's what happened to him during his time in Nevada. Maybe that's why he can't remember any of what happened to him there. However, the full extent of all of this won't be revealed until much later in the game. So for now, just try to keep it in the back of your mind that Judge was a USIA test subject, and he was inserted into this department to see if his training was effective. September 29th, 2025. Twisted Nerve. Taking a break from the conspiracies for a while, Judge's next call is something that feels far more routine. Investigators have tracked down a possible meth operation being run out of an abandoned property in 213 Park. It's believed the location is being used as a storage and cookhouse, though at this point, little is known about the people involved. This bust could deal a significant blow to the drug trade in Los Sueños, so Judge and D Platoon are assigned to clear the building, and upon arrival, it becomes clear who's behind the operation. Los Locos del Pacifico. a brutal gang with ties to the Sonoran cartel, responsible for funneling large amounts of meth and other drugs into the streets of Los Sueños, and business appears to be thriving. By their own records, the group is pulling in hundreds of thousands of dollars each week. It also looks like they have plans to expand their operation, specifically by tunneling into the city's drainage system, allowing them to move product directly beneath the LSPD's nose. And at the back of the property, we can see where that plan is already in motion. Several crude tunnels have been dug deep underground, and while they've hit water, they haven't quite hit the drainage system yet. After clearing this tunnel of hostiles and reporting the meth labs in the house, though, the operation comes to an end without much fanfare. September 30th, 2025. Stolen Valor. The next night, LSPD SWAT responds to another call in the same area. A few days earlier, some patrol officers had pursued a suspect after a narcotics deal, but during the chase, the two partners became separated, and now one of those officers, Michael Rodriguez, is missing. To make matters worse, he vanished near the Edgeware apartment complex, an area firmly under the control of the 213 Parkside Rollers, a gang that keeps a low profile but has a heavy reputation for violence. The group is partially led by a man named Dylan Parker, who is reportedly unstable and holds a deep hatred for authority figures. Somewhat clichély, Parker's father was a corrupt cop and abused him and his mother at a young age, and now Parker has an open hostility towards anyone wearing a badge. LSPD has reason to believe that members of this gang are involved in the officer's disappearance. So, with the situation volatile and time working against them, Judge and D Platoon are sent in to locate Officer Rodriguez. Upon arriving at the apartment complex, it quickly becomes clear that the building is host to more than just tenants. A prostitution ring is operating out of one of the units, while a marijuana grow operation has been set up in the basement, and it's there that we'll find Officer Rodriguez, hanging limply from the ceiling. Beyond reporting his body and clearing the rest of the building, though, there isn't much left to be done here. This is one of the first moments in Ready or Not where the cracks in the LSPD begin to show. The department is stretched thin. They're deploying the same SWAT team within hours with little time to recover or regroup. And at the same time, inexperienced officers are being pushed into situations that they're not ready to handle. This reality is backed up by details scattered throughout the station, and decisions like cutting corners and rushing deployments are beginning to carry real consequences. The death of Officer Rodriguez is just one of them. October 1st, 2025, Ides of March. Over the past several weeks, U.S. Senator Cornelius Fremont has come under heavy criticism after passing a bill that dramatically cut funding for VA hospitals. As a result, many veterans, those who served and were wounded overseas, are no longer able to receive the care that they need. And for those who can, the cost is often devastating. Throughout the game, it's clear that Los Sueños has a massive homeless population. And judging by the protest signs scattered throughout these encampments, it's likely that many of these men are veterans. Fremont, however, appears largely unfazed by the backlash. If anything, it hasn't slowed him down a bit. He's currently planning a presidential run for 2028, but the veterans haven't let this go. A group of disgruntled vets eventually forms an organization known as the Left Behind, and after exhausting what they see as every peaceful avenue, they decide to take matters into their own hands. During one of Fremont's campaign rallies in Brisa Cove, the group opens fire on the senator from a high-rise apartment building. Fremont is only grazed and is quickly evacuated by a Secret Service detail, but the situation escalates. Members of the Left Behind take several civilians hostage inside the building, and once again, Judge and D Platoon are called in to bring the situation under control. As they begin to clear the apartments, though, they'll start to notice that many of the suspects are missing limbs or wearing prosthetics. In short, they're men who had their lives ruined by this new legislation. And while you may have your own opinions on the morality of these men, the fact here is they killed 6 innocent civilians while perpetrating this attack. Eventually, though, Judge and his men are able to apprehend all of the suspects and bring the situation to an end. Curiously enough, though, back at the police station, there's actually some more evidence that shines a bit more light on all of this. Most notably, investigators recover the Left Behind's plan of attack, a detailed map outlining multiple emergency routes for Fremont's motorcade, which raises an important question. How did they get access to something like this? Information like this isn't public knowledge. It's highly sensitive, so someone had to give it to them. So what exactly is this suggesting? Well, back at Gerard's cabin, there were actually several references to the senator and this veteran group. And in fact, there was a direct reference to the exact building and room that the men would make their assault from. I think it was likely Gerard who fed these men their information, as it was likely his way of striking back at the government. But right now, we can't really say for certain. What is clear, though, is that several members of the Left Behind are still out there, and less than a few hours after their first attack, they would strike again. October 1st, 2025, Sins of the Father. Following the assassination attempt on Cornelius Fremont, the senator's family was moved to the upscale Clemente Hotel for protection. However, later that night, while returning from a walk, one of Fremont's children, Michael, spotted a group of armed men trying to enter the building via a fire escape. Security immediately places the hotel on lockdown, but things are much worse here than they seem. It's believed that several members of the family's Secret Service detail have been compromised and may be actively assisting the attackers. At this point, it becomes clear that the Left Behind aren't here to negotiate, they're here to finish what they started. And unable to send in regular officers to resolve the situation, SWAT is sent in to intervene. Upon arrival, Judge and his team will find out that the majority of the Secret Service team has been compromised, and that there are countless of them that just seem to be roaming the halls, hunting down the family. Interestingly enough, we can eventually find a voicemail that Senator Fremont left his wife in an effort to warn his family about the attack.
Lucia, where are you? I've been trying to call you for a while now. I don't have much time to talk. The agent protecting me just left to use the bathroom. Listen to me very carefully. You and the kids need to call my contact at the NSA and get... sorry, I lost track of what I was saying. Yes. Oh, right. Listen to me carefully. Do you remember verse Luke 22, 1 through 6? Whenever I'm scared, I think of this because it reminds me to put all my trust in God. I hope this verse finds you well.
Now, I won't read this entire Bible passage verbatim, but the general idea of it is that it describes Judas's betrayal of Jesus. Senator Fremont and his family are known to be devout Protestants, so this is actually a subtle way of him alerting his wife that something's wrong without drawing too much attention to himself. And it seems like his warning worked just in the nick of time, because it allowed for his family to take cover and hide before the agents came kicking down the doors. However, something worth noting is that in the new DLC, it's confirmed that Senator Fremont dies this same night, and given how healthy he sounds on the call, it's safe to assume that whoever interrupted him here is ultimately the one who killed him. It seems the veterans he impacted with his politics were far closer to him than he ever realized, and their plan to assassinate him succeeded. Downstairs, Judge can find what the group had planned for the rest of the senator's family. Several chairs are bound with rope in front of the ward Dishonor, with a camcorder set up facing them. It appears that they intended to execute the entire family and live stream it for the world to see. But luckily, we're able to stop the plot before it goes any further. Something else worth mentioning in this mission are some of the smaller background details within the Clemente Hotel. Most notably, there are multiple references to something called the Green Dragon Society. Throughout the halls, we can find photographs of what appear to be US presidents and other influential figures all posing in front of the same dragon painting, each wearing a strange dragon pin on their jackets. It seems that many of the men displayed here are members of this society, but what exactly is it? Is it some kind of secret organization, something akin to the Illuminati? As of right now, we can't say for certain. However, its elite clientele certainly does raise a few eyebrows. October 6th, 2025, hunger strike. After the senator's assassination, things in the city begin to settle down a bit. At least, they do on the surface. The next time Judge and D Platoon are called in, it's in response to a gang shootout in a fast food parking lot. The violence is believed to be between the Cardenas family and Los Locos, and while we haven't encountered the Cardenas before, we have dealt with Los Locos, suggesting that this was likely some sort of drug deal gone wrong. Investigators have also raised suspicions about the fast food chain Chico's, which may be operating as a front for cartel activity, something sort of similar to what we see with Los Pollos Hermanos in Breaking Bad, but as of right now, that can't be said for certain. As D Platoon clears the building though, it quickly becomes clear that something else is going on behind the scenes here. We can find newspaper articles reporting strange activity across multiple restaurant locations. There are signs that employees have been hosting illegal cockfights above the dining area, but most damning, there's documentation upstairs detailing a money laundering scheme tied to the restaurant's general manager. After finding all of this though, nothing much of note really remains. Judge and his team arrest members of both the Cardenas family and Los Locos, and then return back to the station. October 15th, 2025, Rust Belt. It isn't long after the fast food raid that Los Locos make an appearance back on our radar, though. Confirmation of a coyote stash house has been made in the border town of Muerto Mesa, and intel suggests the gang is using this place to funnel people, cash, and product. Los Locos seems to know that word has gotten out to authorities though, as now they're planning a full evacuation of the property tonight. Vehicles have reportedly been coming and going at all hours, and whatever operation they've built here, it's being dismantled fast. If there's any hope of continuing this investigation and securing convictions, Judge and his team need to move now. It's believed that beneath the farm lies a massive network of tunnels stretching all the way into Mexico, but there are no reliable maps and no clear understanding of what's waiting underground, which means Judge and his men will be going in blind. Once they arrive at the property and begin searching, the scale of the operation becomes clear almost immediately. Inside of the farmhouse, Judge can find a slew of fake passports along with suitcases and duffel bags packed tightly with cash. But the real discovery comes shortly after, when the entrance to the tunnel system is uncovered. Unlike the crude, improvised tunnels that we saw back in 213 Park, these are far more developed. They're wider, reinforced. This isn't something that was thrown together by a meth head, it's legitimate infrastructure, and it speaks to just how much traffic must be moving through here. As the team pushes deeper, they'll encounter members of Los Locos, alongside groups of migrants being moved through the tunnels. Had we arrived an hour or two later, who knows if these people would even still be here. At the far end of the tunnel network, though, the team eventually reaches an underground river, where two small boats sit waiting at the edge of the water. It becomes clear to us that this was the finish line for the cartel, using the river as a way to ferry people directly across the border. But once we call this in and take out the remaining enemies though, there isn't much else to report here. Later on at the station though, it's revealed that the cartel is far more organized than we may have first thought, as some of the evidence that we secured are literal notes on Border Patrol agents. The most interesting piece of evidence to me though is a text exchange between one of the Los Locos coyotes and a customer. LSPD's tracking distribution. Go to Muerto Mesa tunnel with what you have now. Bring cash for trip. 150,000 from safe. Okay, driving. Go straight to water. Don't look if you hear a child crying. No children in the tunnel. According to the evidence logs, LSPD Search and Rescue later conducted an operation to locate the crying child referenced in the message, but the search turned up nothing. No child, no remains. Further expeditions are planned to sweep the subterranean river system later on, but it's unlikely authorities will ever find anything. Some players will point to this, along with some distant glowing eyes in the tunnel, as evidence that something unnatural must be lurking underground. But that explanation doesn't really hold up in my book. To me, there is a far more grounded and far more disturbing possibility. This may be evidence that Los Locos is involved in child trafficking. Their instructions to ignore the sounds of crying children suggests that this is a common experience down there, and something that the coyotes want their clients to ignore. And as we'll see later in Ready or Not, this is by no means an isolated case. October 17th, 2025, Elephant. Just 2 days after the raid on the tunnels, Los Sueños would find itself in the national headlines again. But this time, it would be for something far more unexpected: a school shooting. At approximately 9:30 in the morning, 4 armed gunmen stormed the science building at Watt Community College. These men moved through the lobby and into an active lecture hall before opening fire on a room full of students. Campus security officers Ibanez and Blair responded immediately, racing towards the sound of gunfire, but the situation quickly overwhelmed them. One is wounded while the other is pinned down and ultimately forced to retreat. At this point, critical details remain unclear. The shooter's exact location within the school is unknown. Their motives are unknown, and it's not yet confirmed whether the attack was connected to a larger terrorist threat, but right now, there's no time to wait for answers. Judge and his team are deployed to the campus to stop the situation before it escalates any further. Once inside the building, D Platoon has to move quickly to prevent further casualties, and as they begin clearing the halls, a new threat emerges. 2 bombs, built from propane tanks, have been planted throughout the school. These shooters aren't just opening fire, they're trying to bring the entire building down with everyone inside. Through swift action, though, Judge and his team are able to bring the situation to an end, neutralizing the threat before any further civilian lives are lost. An investigation afterwards discovered that several of the shooters had been prescribed antidepressants and had them in their system at the time of the attack, which leads to mental illness being a possible link to the shooting. A recovered social media post shows that one of the shooters, Archie, was just done with the world. He was miserable with his lot in life, so he decided it would be a good idea to kill as many people as possible. Perhaps it was his twisted idea of legacy, of living on in infamy. But in Los Sueños, cruelty like this isn't remembered, it's routine. October 25th, 2025. Greased palms. After the shooting at Watt Community College, things in the city began to cool down a bit. At least, they would for a week. 2 LSPD detectives are sent to the Los Sueños Postal Service building, where they intend to question FISA agent and customs inspector Jack Adams. Adams is suspected of using his position to help smuggle weapons in through the Postal Service. At the time, investigators believed that he may have been working alongside foreign actors or local gangs, and that suspicion was confirmed almost immediately. When the 2 officers arrived, they came under fire from multiple armed individuals, men later identified as Los Locos gang members. D Platoon is dispatched to bring the situation to a close, but this time, their orders are a bit different. While Agent Adams may pose as an active threat, we've been instructed to take him in alive for questioning. It seems that his superiors at FISA have taken a serious interest in what he's been doing, and they want to hear the story of what he's been up to straight from the horse's mouth. But with that briefing out of the way, Judge and his team move in to the facility. The evidence found around the level suggests that Adams had a pretty smooth operation going on at the post office. His job as the customs inspector was to oversee foreign packages coming in through the mail. These boxes were then resealed and stamped with a FISA-approved sticker. In essence, Jack Adams was the one and only failsafe that needed to be passed here, and with him now in Los Locos' pocket, he was willing to do whatever they needed so long as they paid him well. It also seems that Adams was using his connections and resources within FISA to take out his competitors, as we can see from covert photos around his office. We can also see where he makes reference to another gun-running operation called the Tran Boys, where he threatens to call the cops on them. Interestingly though, it appears that Los Locos were starting to get pretty sick of Adams' behavior. They were alarmed with how easily he played both sides of the law, and it's likely they were worried that he'd turn on them next. In fact, they were actually about to head over to his office and kill him right when those detectives showed up. After clearing the building though, Judge and D Platoon are able to bring an end to the operation. However, the repercussions of Jack Adams' actions are soon felt in the next mission. December 3rd, 2025. Ends of the Earth. A couple weeks back, LSPD investigators received a tip from an anonymous caller claiming that a group of brothers have been modifying and selling illegal weapons out of their home. The The caller urges the LSPD to look into the situation and even provides the address of where the men live. But from what we just saw in our previous mission, it's pretty obvious that this caller was Agent Adams. Although he initially made this report to eliminate his competition, now that he's in custody, it's a lead that's genuinely worth following up on. Now, the men running this operation are the Tran brothers, and while at first it may seem like this is just a scheme to fund a life of excess, it quickly becomes clear that that isn't the case. The boy's mother, Hugh Nguyen, is battling stage 4 lung cancer. It appears that the brothers have been doing all of this to pay for her medical treatment. The family is heavily in debt and unable to cover the cost of care. And as a result, the brothers have turned to illegally modifying and selling firearms in an attempt to keep up with the expenses. When D Platoon makes entry, this is all but confirmed. Medical bills litter the floors and countertops, and upstairs in the mother's bedroom, there's a makeshift hospital room set up to care for her. Now, I've always found myself partial to the Tran brothers because, like many of you, I've had people in my life suffer through cancer, and if it came down to it, I can understand the instinct to do whatever it took to make sure that they were cared for. However, the Tran brothers aren't just committing any crime, they're manufacturing and distributing illegal weapons. We've already seen the kind of damage that mass shootings and gang violence has done to Los Sueños, and it's not hard to imagine that some of those weapons passed through places just like this. So while the brothers may be trying to save their mother, they're also feeding the same violence that's tearing the city apart, putting automatic weapons into the hands of people who will use them without hesitation. Judge and his team are able to apprehend all of the brothers running the operation, but it leaves one question. What'll happen to their mother? With no one left to care for her or to afford her treatment, her fate is all but sealed. And with federal weapons charges likely keeping the brothers incarcerated for the foreseeable future, there's no one coming back to save her. It's the sad legacy of a family consumed by the darkness of Los Sueños. December 8th, 2025, 23 megabytes a second. The week following the Tran operation, Judge and D Platoon are once again called out to a private residence. But this one is a bit different. LSPD receives a 911 call from a man claiming he's killed his mother, intends to kill his brother, and then plans to take his own life. And then the line goes dead. The more you start to dig into the briefing, though, the more this situation starts to shift. The caller, Michael Williams, is a popular online streamer with a large, let's just say, degenerate audience. Given his presence online, it's possible he provoked someone who was watching, and in response, his address was leaked, leading to a fake emergency call intended to get his house swatted. At this point, though, none of that's confirmed, so Judge and D Platoon move in. Something immediately feels weird upon our arrival, though. Armed individuals can be seen loitering around the property, and further investigation reveals that Michael's been stealing electricity to run a bit mining operation out of a neighboring unit. So even if the initial call turns out to be false, there's already clear evidence of criminal activity here. But the bit mining operation isn't the real story. Once inside Michael's apartment, the scene initially matches expectations. It's a cluttered Redditor den, filled with trash, food containers, and anime figurines. But the deeper you look, the more disturbing it starts to become. Photos of children are scattered across his computer and desk, and on a nearby table, there's a written guide outlining how to approach and manipulate minors online. Michael isn't just a streamer, he's actively preying on children. He's posing as someone else and exploiting the most vulnerable. It's a disturbing thought, but without that initial call, even if it wasn't an effort to swat him, these crimes likely would have gone unnoticed. And as we'll soon find out, this is only the beginning. December 15th, 2025, Sinuous Trail. The following week, investigators are able to link activity from Michael Williams' computer to a data storage facility operated by MindJot. It's believed that at least one of the servers on site is being used to store CSAM. The company also hosts a network that allows users to remain completely anonymous, which has enabled the trafficking of everything from illegal weapons to drugs. So a server containing illicit material wouldn't really be out of place here. If you couldn't tell, MindJot is a tech company on on the brink of bankruptcy, and it appears that they've been making questionable deals with various bad actors just to stay afloat. One of the few things that the company still invests in, though, is a heavily armed security team, largely in response to a string of robberies at the facility. To make matters worse, one of those robberies was carried out by men posing as police. During the incident, an employee was abducted and later killed by men dressed as police officers. So, as a result, tensions at the facility are pretty high. Staff and security are also extremely wary of law enforcement, meaning that any police presence is likely to be met with resistance. Regardless, though, investigators need access to this building to determine the extent of what's happening inside. So, D Platoon is assigned to enter the facility and secure it. While clearing the building, though, D Platoon will begin to uncover signs of suspicious activity. An email on one of the computers shows an employee raising concerns about undocumented drives marked with the initials AV being delivered to the facility without being cataloged anywhere. This presents a serious issue. With no records, there's no way for the company to verify what's being brought in. And if those drives contain illicit material, it puts the entire company at risk. Despite this, though, it appears management chose to ignore those warnings. As the rest of the building is cleared, little else stands out to us, but investigators later recover a separate 250 terabyte rack filled with storage drives. Eerily enough, these drives are marked with those same AV initials. Given everything that we've uncovered so far, it's pretty reasonable to assume that these drives contain illegal material too. And after decrypting the data, investigators discover information pointing towards a child talent agency in the row. December 21st, 2025, The Spider. Now, this talent agency is led by one George Brixley, a man previously charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, and sexual assault. How he's able to operate anywhere near children is beyond me. The agency itself is run out of a former safe injection clinic, located in one of the most rundown areas of the city. Now, it's immediately clear just upon seeing the building and surrounding area that whatever is going on in this place must be bad. There are homeless encampments littering the streets, and it's pretty obvious from the outset that this is not a safe place to be taking your kids. But inside, things get worse. The building is in a state of decay. There's no real attempt to make it functional, let alone safe. Instead, the walls are covered in crude drawings, with toys scattered in corners as if that alone is enough to pass it off as something meant for children. It's the kind of environment you get when people who have never interacted with a kid try to imitate what they think childhood looks like. And as you move deeper through the building, that unease only grows. Inside of one of the offices, there's evidence that Brixley was in the middle of signing a contract with a parent, one that would give him sole representation over their child. But the contract here isn't the most concerning part. Scattered across his desk are several condoms, alongside a bottle of whiskey. The implication here, difficult to ignore. Whether it's manipulation of the parents, exploitation of the children, or both, something far worse is happening here. And the messages scrawled across the walls only reinforce that. On the opposite side of the building, we'll find Brixley's other office, where inappropriate photos of children are scattered across his desk, sitting beside a briefcase filled with cash. At this point, the picture becomes clear. George Brixley is taking advantage of desperate parents in one of the poorest areas in Los Sueños. He's effectively offering them a trade, money in exchange for access to their children. And while it's tempting to believe that these parents don't understand what's happening, the reality is harder to ignore. There's nothing about this talent agency that resembles legitimate work. These parents know. They know that they're trading their children's safety for money. The final piece of evidence comes in the form of a message exchange between Brixley and a contact referred to only as AV. Whoever this is appears to be the same individual connected to the undocumented drives at the mine shop facility, and this message leaves little room for interpretation. Perfect. She's gonna look great on the cover. P.S. I'll get her to smile. After clearing the rest of the building, though, the mission comes to an end. January 6th, 2026, Valley of the Dolls. It isn't long before LSPD receives another break in the case, though. This time, cybercrime units believe that they've identified the man behind this entire operation. Amos Vole, a well-known adult film star turned philanthropist, presents himself publicly as a good guy. Despite his past in the industry, he's donated a lot of money to charity and frequently engages in humanitarian work all over the globe. However, investigators have now linked Vole to a shell company, an offshore bank account that has been routing funds to Brixley Talent Time every Sunday for the past 6 years. His initials, AV, also appear on all of the seized hard drives, as well as in communications tied to George Brixley. Taken together, all of this evidence begins to form a pretty strong case against him, but there's a complication. Vole is currently hosting his daughter's birthday party with a large number of guests in attendance. He's also recently hired Bolton Security, a private firm composed of former law enforcement and military personnel, meaning any attempt at infiltration is expected to meet heavy resistance. D Platoon's objectives are straightforward, though. Apprehend and arrest Amos Vole and secure any computers or storage devices on the property. Bolton Security will engage D Platoon on contact, and a firefight erupts inside the residence. The environment quickly becomes unstable, with civilians attempting to flee and take cover all throughout the property. Despite the chaos, though, we can find several pieces of very incriminating evidence all throughout the house. For instance, right as soon as we walk in the doors, we can find what's assumed to be an adult video of Amos's wife playing for all of his party guests. However, if we cross-reference the date on the video with his wife's birthday that we find in the briefing, we'll find out that she was actually underage at the time that this was filmed. So there's evidence of CP literally as soon as we walk in the door. Continuing through the house, though, we'll find drowned hard drives, burned boxes of documents, and even more labeled CSAM material all around his house. In Vole's bedroom, he has a bunch of DVDs, and on them are the names and ages of the victims shown in the video. Outside, we can even find where he set up a competition for all of his daughter's friends to take pictures of their feet, and then he would come by and judge them to declare a winner and give them a special prize. I mean, I think it's safe to say that this guy's a degenerate, but we don't really understand just how bad things are here until we make our way into the basement. Vole's basement is perhaps one of the most unsettling areas of any game that I've played, and it quickly stands out from the rest of the level as soon as D Platoon makes entry. In it, we can see a photo room filled with children's toys and a crib. And given what we now know about this man, it's clear that whatever is going on down here is bad. Somehow, the further we go, the worse it gets. Next to this is a red room made for processing photographs, and as you could probably expect at this point, the photographs here are of children. There are bookcases filled to the brim with these materials, once again cataloged by the name of the victims and of how old they were. A bit further past this is a shrine that Vole made of his own daughter. It seems that he's been taking photos of her from when she was much younger, and now that it's her 18th birthday, he seems very eager to celebrate it for one reason or another. The worst thing down here isn't as assuming, though. When we walk into the final room of the basement, we can see a bunch of barrels sitting beneath a hole in the floor, and above them sits a cement mixer. At first glance, it almost passes as renovation work, but then the fuller picture starts to surface. Children's clothes, discarded toys, flies in the air. And in that moment, the illusion falls apart. This is what becomes of Vole's victims. He brought these kids to his basement, exploited them, and then killed them. And if that wasn't bad enough, he decides to bury their bodies here, like some sick tomb. The amount of barrels outside and the time that this operation has been going on for suggests that these 9 barrels aren't the only ones out there. I imagine that the burial of the bodies underneath of his own house was likely done in haste, as he didn't have enough time to sneak them off the property before police arrived. And as much as we would all love to put a bullet in the middle of this guy's eyes, the story here canonically ends with Amos Vole being arrested. Before moving on though, there's still a couple of pieces of evidence that need to be addressed to get a fuller picture of what's going on. Most notably, there's a really unsettling painting found in Vole's possession that feels eerily similar to Eyes Wide Shut. But the real detail isn't in the painting itself, because on the back of it, we can find a handwritten letter. Amos, you provide me and my associates such delight. There's little joy left in this world, except for within those so fresh to it, and therein lies such a gift few are privy to. You have our admiration for sharing this across the globe in a digital fashion, but nothing compares to the sensation of flesh touching flesh and the energy that we so very much enjoy absorbing when face to face. I hope we can treat you handsomely at the next banquet with a selection from our private reserve. In the meantime, a token of our appreciation. G. In addition to this, back at the talent agency, we found a really strange stamped letter in the trash, which shared Vole's, Brixley's, as well as 6 other names. The paper gives off the same sort of formality that an official contract would, but more notably, this evidence suggests that there's a much wider predator network out there, and Vole and Brixley were just a part of it. It's also worth mentioning that Vole's house contains references to a group known as the Spider, which, for my money, is the most likely candidate for who they're working with. If you take a closer look at the symbol itself, it's made up of 8 distinct legs, each shaped like a person. There also just so happen to be 8 names listed on the contract that we found, including Vole's and Brixley's. If that connection holds, then we've only eradicated 2 legs of this operation. 6 others are still out there. February 10th, 2026. Buy cheap, buy twice. A few weeks later, D Platoon has something else catch their attention though. LSPD detectives were conducting a routine warrant service at a small used car dealership in North Hills when suddenly they came under fire. A shootout broke out across the parking lot and into the neighboring street, and now multiple officers are down and backup has been requested. The department had already been investigating the dealership for some time, suspecting that it was tied to the illegal weapons trade in Los Sueños. Evidence suggests that this is where the Tran brothers had been funneling their firearms for distribution, but now, it seems that the investigation has been compromised. To make matters worse, LSPD had 2 undercover officers inside the building when the shooting started, Officer Mike Esperanza and Officer Brian Greer. D Platoon has been tasked with making entry, stopping the gunfire, and locating the missing officers before the situation deteriorates any further. Upon our arrival to the scene, we'll find obvious signs of a shootout, with officers taking cover behind tents and trash cans and squad cars wrecked into light poles. It seems that the men here must have opened fire on them as soon as they arrived, but how could they know that the LSPD was coming? Moving around the property a bit more, Judge and D Platoon will enter a garage, and it's here that we'll see a deal was taking place between our old friends in Los Locos and a new group known as the Glukowski Mafia. At this point, it becomes pretty clear that the car dealership was serving as a hub for multiple criminal operations. Most notably, though, weapons. In a back room of the garage, there's a massive weapons cache, boxes upon boxes of illegal firearms. With Agent Jack Adams and the Tran brothers now off the board, it's likely Los Locos have been forced to find new suppliers. And with no one stateside able to meet that demand, they've now turned towards the Russian Mafia. But it doesn't stop there. There's also a large-scale cocaine operation being run through the garage. The drugs are being hidden inside the door panels of vehicles, then shipped out as exports, moving product across borders without drawing any attention. Just from this one building, the scale of the operation starts to come into focus. We'll find a vehicle marked with a Port Hoken detail loaded with suitcases of cash, and it's not the only one. Outside, there are multiple trucks, 2 semis and a box truck, all bearing the same Port Hoken markings. It's likely these vehicles are being used to move goods to and from the port, creating a steady pipeline for importing and exporting illegal product. But then, there's something else. On the back of one of the vans, the same spider insignia seen at Vol's house appears again, suggesting that drugs and weapons aren't the only things being trafficked through here. Upon entering the actual dealership, this is confirmed. In one of the offices, Judge and his team will find boxes upon boxes of shredded documents, papers which catalog women. It's obvious through just a quick glance at these papers that these women are being sold. You can literally find a sheet of paper with all of their names and prices next to them. Even more alarmingly, though, is that this doesn't seem to be the hub of the operation. It's Port Hoken. And once again, as if to confirm who's really running the show here, we see the spider symbol again. This isn't all that there is to the car dealership, though, because upstairs, the team discovers where Officer Greer had his cover blown. The man was tied to a chair before being beaten and then executed. It's likely that he was identified before the raid and then tortured, which would explain why officers were ambushed almost immediately upon their arrival. There is one small relief to the situation, though. Officer Esperanza appears to have escaped the building before the situation escalated. But still, this doesn't change the larger picture. A large-scale human trafficking operation is running through Los Sueños and its port. And based on the volume of shredded records found in here, it's been active for a very long time. And as Judge and his team step back out into the night, one thing is certain. Whatever comes next will define the future of this city. February 18th, 2026. Hide and seek. LSPD is able to use the information gathered from the dealership mission, along with intel from undercover informants, to identify a major deal set to take place at Port Hoken the following week. It appears this operation stretches all across the western seaboard, with a large multinational deal going down soon. Russian cargo ships have been observed moving product from Vancouver down to Colombia, with much of it passing directly through this port. Investigators still don't know exactly where the illegal cargo is being held, or even precisely what they're looking for, but it's believed to involve large quantities of drugs, weapons, and potentially trafficking victims. Needless to say, this operation is big. It's become a joint effort between the LSPD, the ATF, and FISA, which means a much more complicated chain of command. To make matters worse here, a Category 5 storm named Hurricane Antonio is making landfall just as the operation begins. Visibility is limited, conditions are unstable, and suspects are expected to be heavily armed. D Platoon has no clear picture of what they're about to walk into. The pressure in the air feels a bit heavier than usual as the team arrives via boat, slipping quietly into the end of the port under the cover of the storm. Whatever it is that's been happening here, it ends tonight. Making their way through the port, D Platoon will encounter more members of Los Locos and the Russian Mafia, as well as many port workers who just seem to be trying to get away from all of this. As it turns out, a lot of the port employees here actually know of the illegal activity that's been going on, but due to threats against them and their families, they've chosen to stay quiet out of fear. The deeper the team pushes into the port, the more blatant the operation becomes. Cargo containers filled with product have been marked with the same spider graffiti that we've seen before, and inside there are drugs, weapons, and cars, each one a part of the spider's operation. But just before entering Warehouse 13 at the end of the port, D Platoon comes across another container, and what's inside it is far worse than anything they've seen so far. The container is filled with cold, shivering women, trafficked from God knows how far away. It's unclear how long they've been sitting here, but it's obvious that we need to get these women out of here now. But just then, an unfamiliar voice comes in over the radio.
This is FISA. Stand down and shut that door, entry team. We're sending a unit to secure the container and its contents.
What? We're not leaving them like this.
Close the doors! Unless you want to interfere with a federal investigation, I suggest you shut the door and lock it behind you. Do your job and proceed with your mission. Understood?
Understood. Put the other guy back on. We'll talk later.
No, we won't be. FISA out.
Now this call implies that FISA intends to let this container continue to its original destination, using it as a way to track the rest of the operation. But instead of rescuing the women, they're allowing them to be used as bait. It goes to show just how desperate investigators are to bring the Spider's operation down. And it's horrifying to think that these women were so close to being saved, only for their rescuers to close the doors on them. And with that, D Platoon closes the container and continues into the warehouse. The sobs of the women still audible as they walk away. As they work their way further into the back of the warehouse, it becomes clear that this building is the hub for something at the port. But what that isn't clear until they reach the very end. At the end of the warehouse, we can find 2 cars sitting with their headlights focused on a final Spider container. The text next to it reading, "Belly of the Beast." Inside of it is a winding hallway made out of shipping containers, illuminated by eerie red light bulbs and filled with mannequins. And when we make it to the end of it, we find out what the crowd has gathered here for tonight. It wasn't some weapons deal. It was an auction for women. Inside, we find a room complete with a podium, a server station, and a variety of masks for participants to choose from. Women are brought out against their will and sold to the highest bidder, before presumably being shipped off to wherever they're meant to go. Notably, there are 8 laptops also sitting in the room, each showing webcam footage of a different masked man. Now, at first, this seemed a bit strange to me, because with the Spider losing 2 of its members in Brixley and Vole, you'd only expect there to be 6 laptops here. But after thinking about it some more, it started to make more sense. A trafficking operation of this scale likely functions like a corporation or a business, and when someone stops showing up to work, they're replaced. Much like a Hydra, if you don't take out the entire Spider in one fell swoop, it simply regroups. And the fact that they've already replaced figures like Amos Vole and George Brixley so quickly is startling. After seeing this room and arresting those at the port, there isn't much more that the LSPD can do here. And while you'd expect a more satisfying conclusion to the game, there's nothing to suggest that the Spider has actually been stopped here. If anything, the final mission leaves Los Sueños feeling worse than it did before, like something has shifted here for the worse. FISA and the ATF are still tracking the network and still investigating, but for now, all that's been done here is a temporary disruption. And while this may mark the end of the Spider's storyline in Ready or Not, our time in this city is far from over. February 19th, 2026, Lawmaker. As mentioned earlier though, that same night, Los Sueños is hit by Hurricane Antonio, a Category 5 storm that devastates large portions of the city. And in a place like Los Sueños, chaos like that doesn't go unused. With the city in disarray and the LSPD stretched thin, different criminals move in to take advantage of the situation. So just one day after the raid on Port Hoken, Judge and D Platoon are called out again, forced back into the field before they've had any time to recover. In this particular mission, they're introduced to a new group, the UPF, or United Planet Front. The UPF is a group of environmentalists turned eco-terrorists, and rather than protesting, they've instead turned to more direct means of making their opinions felt. The group has taken the opportunity presented by the storm to break into the home of Sven Anderson Lincoln, a major oil lobbyist who plans to bring offshore oil rigs to the coasts of Los Sueños. Anderson Lincoln seems to genuinely believe that these oil rigs will be a good opportunity for the city, providing jobs and stimulating the economy in a difficult time. However, in the process, he's also been avoiding multiple safety regulations, which feels far more in line with the corruption that we've seen in this city. The UPF has clearly taken notice of this and wants to prevent him from making it a reality. So, a group of masked men is sent to the lobbyist's house with the intent to kill him and his family. As D Platoon makes entry to the property, they'll see some of the damage from the storm around the house, although it's clear to us that this mansion is a bit further away from the coast, so the worst of it seems to just be some tipped over patio furniture and leaves scattering the ground. The damage by the UPF on the inside of the house is far more substantial. They've cut down chandeliers, spray painted the walls, and done just about everything they can to leave their mark here. However, as Judge and D Platoon move through the mansion, they're able to neutralize the UPF and prevent them from harming the lobbyist and his family. The property was actually outfitted with multiple hidden panic rooms, and the family managed to reach one of them before their attackers could find them. Interestingly, though, the evidence for this mission seems to suggest that there may have been a bit more going on behind the scenes with this attack. The then leader of the UPF, Tobias Gibson, had received some strange text messages from an unknown number, and that message reads as follows. Gibson, time is now. Use UPF for house task. Find Sal. Media should see violence. Never forget what you know now. Gibson, no activity is seen. You are still in warehouse. Do not be inebriated. You are needed. You play a significant role. Take UPF and go now. Now, based on this message, it sort of seems like there's someone else behind the UPF pulling the strings. However, it also seems like they regret hiring the UPF to do this job because their leader is late to the infiltration and seems to have a history of getting drunk on the job. It's currently unclear to us who this mysterious orchestrator might be, but as we continue through some of the later DLC missions, that'll eventually start to become clear. February 20th, 2026, dorms. A couple hours later, D Platoon is called out to another situation in Greenside, but this time, instead of a massive mansion up in the hills, they're dealing with the complete opposite. An abandoned dormitory, condemned for years, is now believed to be housing a large number of the area's homeless. LSPD has noted the need to clear the building, but after Hurricane Antonio, the structure's no longer safe, and now getting people out has become a priority. Earlier that morning, an LSPD officer attempted to evict the squatters, but was shot by one of them. And while this might seem like a low-level situation for SWAT, the reality is the department is stretched thin and there's no one else to take the call, so once again, it falls to D Platoon. Arriving to the scene here paints a much different picture of Hurricane Antonio than we had seen just earlier. Here, we can see where trees have been knocked down. Debris covers the streets, and there's visible damage to most of all the buildings around us. This area seems like it was a lot closer to the coast when the hurricane made landfall. And of course, it also just so happens to be one of the poorest areas in the city. Inside of the building, though, things look much worse. The floors and ceilings are collapsing, there's standing water in the floors, and there's graffiti and trash all over the place. Just looking around, it becomes pretty obvious why the LSPD needs us to clear this area out. The inhabitants themselves are also a bit agitated, likely because this is their home and there really isn't anywhere else for them to go. Some of the homeless will lunge at D Platoon with knives, while others will try to shoot us when we're not looking. The interesting part about this mission, though, comes towards the end of it, where Judge and D Platoon can find a psychedelic chapel where a man known as the Reverend has been preaching and dealing drugs. It's obvious that the man who set this up wasn't in his right mind, but if we look around a bit more, we can't help but notice the intricacy of this art. Now, we've seen the scribblings and ramblings of drug addicts before, but something about this feels so much more ornate, more intense. For the time being, though, Judge and D Platoon are able to get the homeless safely out of the building, and we can only hope that they'll be able to find another, safer area to shelter in. February 25th, 2026, Narcos. If you can remember, back during the car dealership mission, there were two undercover detectives that we needed to locate, Officer Brian Greer and Officer Mike Esperanza. During that mission, we would eventually find Greer executed in an upstairs conference room, but Esperanza managed to escape the situation. Well, as it turns out, even with all that pandemonium, Officer Esperanza didn't have his cover blown. Los Locos only thought that there was one informant at the dealership, not two, and Esperanza went on to resume his operation for several weeks. However, now, it seems that information has gotten out, and the Los Locos have found out that Esperanza is working with the LSPD.
911, this call is being recorded. What is your emergency?
Yes, this is Agent Mike Esperanza. I'm at 25 Hope Street, 213 Park. I'm an undercover officer, but my cover has been blown, and armed suspects are about to enter the property. I don't have room to run. I need you to send everybody you've got.
Did you say Agent Esperanza?
Yes, listen, I don't have the time. There are armed men breaking into this property to kill me. I tried to call my handler, Agent Walter Graham, but I can't reach him. I need you to send people here now. Otherwise, they're going to be finding pieces of me for months.
Okay, please try to stay calm. I've put out a call for Agent Graham and notified all vehicles.
Thank you. Oh, I Shit! Stay back, motherfuckers! Get away from me!
Based on the call, it seems like Los Locos have sent hitmen to take care of Mike Esperanza, so D Platoon is dispatched to stop the attackers before it's too late. However, upon entering Esperanza's residence, it starts to seem like we might already be. The house shows clear signs of a struggle, with blood, glass, and furniture lying all over the place. Just after entering, we can see a chair with rope that was used to tie Esperanza down, with jumper cables, pliers, and a knife next to it to torture him. There's blood all over the walls and floor, and if he's by some chance still alive, then he's in really rough shape. On a nearby wall, it reads, "This is where pigs are skinned," in Spanish, and below it sits the head of a pig. Behind a dresser in Officer Esperanza's bedroom, we can find where he'd been communicating with the LSPD, and can even see a recording of him giving us intel for the car dealership mission. However, given the fact that the door to this room had been kicked in, it seems that Los Locos had discovered this room as well. Making our way out of the house though, D Platoon will work their way through a variety of other homes and backyards, taking out Los Locos members and navigating around civilians, before eventually finding Officer Esperanza like this. The officer has cuts stretching the length of his body, and other areas like his face have been completely disfigured. While we were able to find Esperanza alive, it's clear that he'll never be the same after this attack. As we come to find out later, Esperanza had suspicions that he was being followed by someone, but due to Hurricane Antonio wiping out some of the cell towers, his messages weren't able to get to his handler until it was too late, and it's with that we reach the end of the Home Invasion DLC. When the story picks back up, over a year has passed, and while time has moved forward, it's hard to imagine much has changed for Los Sueños. Still broken, and still just as desperate as ever. September 25th, 2027, Mirage at Sea. The next time we get to play as Judge in D Platoon, it's a much different situation than what we're used to. Two young women are being held off the coast on a luxury yacht against their will. They and their friend were partying at a nightclub when they caught the attention of Saheed bin Khalid, the son of a wealthy Qatari oligarch. Saheed invited the trio to continue partying with him on his yacht, but unbeknownst to them, he was luring them somewhere where they wouldn't be able to escape. Now, reports suggest that this isn't the first time that Saheed has done something like this, and the boat has even been flagged in the past for a series of sexual assault claims. Based on the evidence we've seen, it looks like Saheed is a serial predator who's been using his yacht as his own personal hunting ground. However, this time, it appears his plans have gone sideways. A 911 call from Kelly Lawson, one of the young girls, indicates that she managed to escape and is now hiding somewhere on the boat. She reports that Saheed and his men are actively searching for her and her friends, and that they've already killed someone else on board the boat. Now, this yacht is a massive vessel and could easily flee US waters, so to ensure that an arrest is made and that these women are saved, Judge and D Platoon are deployed to bring this situation to a close. Now, the boat itself is essentially a mansion on the water, so as D Platoon clears the different rooms, it sort of feels like an ordinary house. And aside from apprehending Saheed and his personal security team, there isn't too much that we can really do here. All that we can really find on board the boat are examples of Saheed's violent personality. For instance, we can find where he had killed one of his own men in a disagreement, with the body hastily being stashed in a storage closet. And this must be a fairly regular occurrence on the yacht, because Saheed just makes a casual note that he needs to dump the body soon, which is unreal. Thankfully though, we're able to stop this chaos before anyone else on board can get hurt, and we're able to put this violent man behind bars for the foreseeable future. October 21st, 2027, Leviathan. About a month after the raid on the yacht though, the usual pandemonium of Los Sueños begins to settle back in. Most notably, there's another assassination attempt. Governor of California, Andrew Whitfield, is delivering a speech at the LSPD police station when a lone gunman approached and fired multiple shots at him. Luckily, the shots missed the governor entirely, and the shooter was quickly taken down by police. The shooter would later be identified as a member of the UPF, and it's believed that they targeted the governor due to his connections with oil lobbyists and lawmakers. And although the group's founder, Tobias Gibson, is now out of the picture, it seems that the UPF have moved on to new leadership. However, just as news of the assassination attempt breaks, LSPD receives another call requiring SWAT intervention. It seems that the attempt on Governor Whitfield's life was only a distraction, because other members of the UPF have now stormed the Heavy Well oil rig, taking the workers hostage and executing several of them on a live stream. With the usual channels once again stretched beyond their limits, the only team available for the job is LSPD SWAT. So, gathering their gear and preparing for deployment, Judge and D Platoon head out into the Pacific. Upon their arrival to the scene, D Platoon will encounter some of the executed workers, either gunned down or hung from the bottom of the oil rig. 5 men sit swinging in front of a banner that reads, "Profit today, judgment tomorrow." As Judge and a squad work their way through the rig, they begin to notice that the UPF is far more heavily armed than the last time that we saw them. Not to mention, using an assassination attempt on the governor as a feint for this operation is a massive escalation from what we've seen previously from them. Continuing forward though, D Platoon will find chat logs between one of the UPF members and an oil rig employee, suggesting that the group had managed to turn one of their workers into an inside man. However, it doesn't seem like the worker had any idea of how far the UPF was planning to take things. Just don't kill anyone. I never signed up for that. In one of the rooms, the team finds a group of hostages, along with a camera and a live stream set up on a laptop. It appears that the UPF intended to execute these men live on camera and broadcast it to the world as a message. Luckily though, Judge and his team are able to bring the situation to an end before anyone else is hurt. But even after the mission, we still have a couple of questions lingering. Most notably, how did the UPF become this organized so quickly? If you can remember, in the Lawmaker mission just a few months prior, their leader Tobias Gibson was arrested alongside the rest of the group, and yet now they seem more structured, more armed, and more dangerous than ever before. The mysterious figure who influenced Gibson is likely still around. As you might recall, at the end of Lawmaker, we recovered Gibson's cell phone, and there were several messages from an unknown number saying things like, "The media should see violence. Never forget what you know now." In my opinion, it's likely that this same individual or group is still pulling the strings, pushing the UPF further into extremism and turning what was once a vocal movement into something far more dangerous. Now, before we get into the next part of this timeline, I just wanted to give you guys a bit of a forewarning. This is the point where the story really starts to get off the rails. To fully understand some of the groups and concepts here, we're going to have to look back at events way back at the beginning of this video. Now, I'm not going to fully summarize everything again, but if something needs to be brought up as a refresher, I will be doing that. Just a couple of weeks after our raid on the oil rig, the LSPD receives something even more bizarre. The USIA themselves have recently contacted the station, saying that there's some sort of major deal going on at the Elysian, an abandoned beachside resort near the edge of the city. Details have been scarce, but LSPD has reason to believe that this is something big. Definitely not the basic drug or gun trades that we've grown accustomed to at this point. The two groups involved are the Los Navegantes del Caos, a fairly mid-level pirate group, and Black Sentinel, a highly trained, decentralized network of special op veterans. According to the Ready or Not art book, quote, Black Sentinel operates under a dark mandate, employing precise and calculated tactics such as cyber warfare, targeted assassinations, and strategic sabotage to disrupt high-profile targets without leaving evidence. End quote. Many of the Black Sentinel have been confirmed to be former USIA members themselves, but suddenly fractured from the organization for one reason or another. And if our past experience with USIA agents is anything to go off of here, this could get messy quickly. Now, it's unclear to us what this trade between these two groups is, but to get a highly experienced group like Black Sentinel involved, it's gotta be pretty serious. We're talking in the neighborhood of chemical weapons, nuclear explosives, or something even worse. If this wasn't already strange enough though, it actually wasn't the LSPD headquarters who received this intel. It was Judge himself. Someone at the USIA just called Judge up on his personal cell and told him about all of this. But What's stranger is that Judge and this USIA contact already seem to know each other, and one of their text exchanges reveals why. Still on for this afternoon at Elysian Hotel. Be there by 1500, no later. Once this is done, it never happened. You need to tell me more about what's going on here. There is no more. You know what you need to know. I know we go back, but I won't send my men to die without knowing why. If they're your men and you're still the man you were, they won't be at risk. Fuck you. No thanks. Maybe later. Black Sentinel are bad news. They've been sniffing around for a long time, including tracking down Gerard Scott. You got to him first. Now they're after something else. Can't say. You'll know when you see it. And the other guys? Nobodies. Pirates who travel the coast pillaging. They're out of their league. What they have cannot get into Black Sentinel hands. Would I lead you astray? Remember Nevada? Fine, I'll get a team ready. But one day, you're giving me answers. One day. Now, this USIA agent tells Judge to remember their time in Nevada and that he'd never lead him astray. The only contact that we know that Judge had in Nevada is Evan. So at this point, it's reasonable to assume that Evan is also working with the USIA. Earlier in the video, we suspected that the agent Brody mentioned in that USIA document was actually Evan, especially since he signed off with the letter E. And this text exchange confirms a lot of that theory. We now know that Evan Brody, a USIA agent, had direct contact with Judge in Nevada. We know that Judge has gaps in his memory from that time, and he can't fully recall what happened to him there. And we also know that Agent Brody was involved in something called the MLO experiment. The goal of this project being to condition people into some sort of incorruptible agents. Now, this project was divided into different batches, known as cohorts, and to our knowledge, there are only 2 of them. The first one was, by all accounts, a failure. The test subjects turned violent and carried out attacks all throughout the city. The second group, though, appeared to be far more successful. Subjects from the second cohort went on to become politicians, public figures, and members of law enforcement. In the experiment's documentation, though, Judge is referred to as Gamma 1, so he's likely a different subject altogether. So, now knowing all of this, why would Agent Brody be contacting Judge about a deal at an abandoned resort? Why wait all this time? Well, as mentioned in our briefing, some members of the Black Sentinel are actually former USIA, so it's possible that they too are connected to the MLO experiment. Perhaps these men were part of that first cohort, and the USIA is worried that they'll do something drastic, just like the test subjects that attacked the dam. As Judge and D Platoon begin to clear the Elysian, it doesn't take long for them to realize that they've never encountered a group quite like this. While Los Navegantes del Caos are fairly standard enemies, the Black Sentinel are not. They're outfitted with full military kits, some of them even more geared up than we are. These men came in here expecting heavy resistance, and for one of the first times in the game, we start to feel like we might be in a little over our head. When working further through the resort, we'll start to find plaques detailing its construction, highlighting the architect's design choices and what they represent. But beyond that, something else starts to stand out. In one of the bathrooms, if Judge breaches a marked wall, he can uncover some more of these eerie statues that we've been seeing throughout the resort. However, this time, they're adorned with strange flowers, and that same flower appears as graffiti in other parts of the resort. Now, the flower that we see here is called a Mariposa lily, and it's a symbol that's tied to the Mariposa Lily Order, or MLO. Now, up until now, we've been talking about just the MLO experiment, but the game also hints at an organized group made up of these test subjects, who, confusingly, also refer to themselves as the MLO. And it seems like this resort may have served as one of their meeting places. And with all of these connections that we've seen thus far, it starts to feel like they might be the ones operating behind the scenes here. Further into the resort, though, we can find a recording from the leader of Black Sentinel, and in it, he states that their objective is to extract a man named Dr. Schwarz. Now, Schwarz, believe it or not, is a former USIA scientist, and as described in the recording, one of the few men who understands what the group needs. It's possible that members of Black Sentinel were among some of these failed MLO test subjects, and considering how the USIA has treated those failures in the past, this could be their own way of pushing back by taking one of the agency's key scientists and using him for their own purposes. The recording here also makes it clear that once the group secures shores, they fully intend to just eliminate Los Navegantes entirely, which, based on what we've seen so far, wouldn't be very difficult for them. That being said though, Black Sentinel didn't come to this trade empty-handed. It appears that they brought some kind of chemical agent as part of the exchange. At least, they did on paper. Realistically, they likely planned to kill Los Navegantes once the deal began, and take both the doctor and the weapon for themselves. But with D Platoon now intervening, that plan never fully plays out. In the end, Judge and his team are able to apprehend members of both groups, and preventing both Dr. Schwarz and this chemical agent from falling into the wrong hands. Interestingly though, evidence recovered after this operation reveals that the chemical agent the Black Sentinel provided was fake. So even if Los Navegantes had managed to escape with it, it wouldn't have done anything. But still though, this mission leaves us with more questions than answers. Was Black Sentinel working with the MLO? Why did they want Dr. Schwarz? And most importantly, what happens next? It would be almost a year later before we got any answers. September 3rd, 2028, No Good Deed. The game gives us another time skip, this time picking up on September 3rd, 2028. We can imagine that things have been largely the same, if not worse, for Los Sueños. Violent crime is at an all-time high, people are unable to feel safe in public, and now this MLO group still seems to be operating from within the shadows. However, it also seems like there's been some change for the better. For instance, Lucia Torres, a beloved community member, has recently been throwing all kinds of fundraisers and events for the community of the city to come together and pick up the pieces. Most recently, she's put together an event to help clean up Blackwood Pier, an area that still hasn't quite fully recovered from Hurricane Antonio. But it's with this event that the darkness of Los Sueños would rear its head once again. A little while prior to the cleanup, there was an unknown cargo vessel spotted near the coastline. The Coast Guard tried to contact it to receive its information, but the vessel never responded. With things being as stretched thin as they are in the city, it was determined that no further action would need to be taken unless the boat got closer to shore. Well, a little while later, the vessel made its way directly towards the shoreline. But before officers could properly react, something would unfold at the pier that would shock the city to its core. At roughly 2100 hours, multiple chemical agents were released across the pier, hidden inside of backpacks. But this chemical wasn't just an irritant, it was a lethal neurotoxin. The compound was brutally efficient, causing victims to hallucinate, bleed internally, and die within a matter of seconds. The agent was identified as being chemical 4L1 and was believed to be the work of Dr. Schwarz, the same scientist that we encountered back at the Elysian. It seems that sometime in the past year, someone else has gotten their hands on him. To make matters worse, as these chemical bombs were going off, several masked men dressed as LSPD officers began shooting the remaining survivors. To put it simply, the pier has become a bloodbath, and it's hypothesized that Lucia Torres and other survivors have managed to hold themselves up inside of the arcade, but it's only a matter of time before they're located by the attackers. Intel suggests that the men committing this assault are Los Navegantes del Caos, but why would a group of pirates be carrying out an attack like this? It doesn't really seem like their MO. Well, if we watch the teaser trailer for the Boiling Point DLC, we can actually see that some of the men with Los Navegantes have MLO patches on their backpacks, indicating that the group is working alongside, or at least has been hired by, the MLO. But after learning that, we don't have much more time to theorize, as Judge and D Platoon need to get down to the pier ASAP. Upon their arrival, they can see where the LSPD and Los Sueños Fire Department both had a small presence at the event today. Although, based on our briefing, it seems like it didn't really matter. Those that were at the pier were likely killed just as soon as the gas attack started. Now, the pier itself has the layout of a small amusement park. There's a Ferris wheel, roller coasters, and all kinds of games and stands for people to check out. And juxtaposed against all of that are the bodies scattered across the boardwalk. Right now, our priority is to make our way to the arcade and secure any remaining survivors. But when we get there, we see something horrible. Lucia Torres, the event organizer, stumbles out of the doors, gasping for air. And behind her, a cloud of lethal neurotoxin pours out into the open. The woman struggles to breathe before collapsing to the ground in a final, choking gurgle. It seems like we were too late. It seems that the attackers anticipated that the arcade would be one of the few places people could take cover. So, they filled it with these gas bombs, and once the shooting started and people rushed inside for cover, they activated them, killing nearly everyone inside. D Platoon has luckily been fitted with gas masks, so they aren't affected, but as they move through the arcade, the damage is clear. Dozens of bodies cover the floor, and in some cases, you can still hear the survivors choking on their own blood. As they continue through the pier, they begin to encounter members of Los Navegantes posing as LSPD officers, and their gear is just about as official as it gets. Badges, uniforms, even the LSPD crest. The only thing that gives these men away are the masks, which they seem to have grabbed from one of the booths on the pier. They're also carrying backpacks filled with more bombs, likely as some kind of dead man's switch in case they're taken out. This is easily one of the most coordinated attacks that we've seen in the game so far, and it appears to have been carried out for no clear reason. So why would the MLO orchestrate something like this? Why target innocent people? The purpose becomes a bit more clear just a few hours later. September 4th, 2028, the LS riots. Following the attack on the pier, the public becomes convinced that the LSPD was responsible. Naturally, the department denies any involvement, but the people of Los Sueños aren't buying it. And honestly, it's not too hard to see why. Throughout the game, public trust in the department has been falling apart. The level of corruption and crime in the city has led many to believe that nearly every branch of the government, every public service, has been compromised. We've seen how Agent Adams dragged FISA's name through the mud. We've seen how the LSPD were complicit in allowing a human trafficking operation to continue. And we've seen how the department itself is falling apart, losing officers, with many of them cracking under the pressure. Plus, it seems like no matter how many people the LSPD arrests, the crime in the city just continues to get worse. And these are things that the public notices. So when armed men dressed in full police gear carry out a highly coordinated attack, something that looks like it could only be done by trained individuals, it's not hard to understand why people think that the LSPD had something to do with it. As a result of all of this, the massive protests across the city have quickly turned into riots, and chaos has consumed the entire city of Los Sueños. This madness can even be seen outside of the police station, where rioters have set fire to cars and the LSPD tries to prevent the crowd from rushing the precinct. September 4th, 2028, all gods burn. In the midst of all of this chaos though, Judge and D Platoon still have a job to do. At around noon, it's confirmed that an armed robbery is taking place at the Unity Trust Bank in downtown Los Sueños. The lobby has been completely overrun, and it seems like all hell has broken loose. Several security staff are missing, and other workers have been found dead on the upper floors. Whoever's behind this isn't just here for the money. Interestingly, there are also explosives being reported at the scene. HMX has been placed on structural supports and inside of the building's elevator shafts. Now, if you remember that unknown vessel we mentioned before the start of the last mission, it seems that Los Navegantes were actually using it to transport massive amounts of explosives, neurotoxins, and other ordnance. The attack on the pier was just meant to be a distraction, meant to get all of this into the city, and now it looks like the MLO has more than enough to work with. However, the men inside of the bank aren't affiliated with Los Navegantes this time. Instead, these men appear to be with Black Sentinel, the other group from the resort. It's unclear how, but it seems that the MLO has managed to bring both of these groups together, using them to carry out coordinated attacks across the city. Because of this, there are also fears that the same neurotoxin used at the pier might be present here, and based on CCTV, there appear to be a large number of Black Sentinel operatives inside the building, alongside potential hostages. So, it's crucial that Judge and D Platoon move with the utmost caution. As SWAT make their way into the bank, though, it's immediate chaos. The riots outside have now spilled into the lobby, and there are dozens of people running, looting, and fighting D Platoon. Our entry is met with a hail of gunfire from almost all angles, and it seems that to make things even more chaotic, Black Sentinel have provided guns for some of the looters to use. But once the dust settles, Judge and his team can begin to make their way around the building. The first thing that we'll notice is the presence of chemical 4L1 again. However, this time, the neurotoxin doesn't seem to be the primary focus. The bombs aren't fully activated. However, if they're shot, they will begin to disperse gas, so it's critical to watch your fire here. Continuing around the bank, we'll find dead security guards, likely killed by Black Sentinel, as well as HMX explosives planted on some of the support columns and elevators. It looks like the MLO wanted their goons to blow this place sky high and take everything inside with it. The primary bomb found in the basement even has a label on it, which reads, "All gods must fall." It's worth noting here that the Unity Trust Bank is the oldest and most trusted bank in Los Sueños. Perhaps the MLO intended to try and take down the financial system, a la something like we see in the movie Fight Club, but their exact motivation here is unclear at the moment. In the basement of the bank, D Platoon could eventually find the vault, and we can hear a faint ringing coming from the inside of it. Fearing that this might be another explosive, we frantically search the bank for a code to open the door. But when we do, we find something almost even more jarring. Inside of the vault is the bank's COO, bound and gagged, with a cell phone sticking out of his mouth. And suddenly, the phone begins to ring.
Curious hands always open the wrong doors. Don't concern yourself with the details of what you see. You bear witness to a course correction in a broken system.
I know who you are.
Ask yourself, who are you?
Don't play games. You killed Vale and countless other innocents. This isn't just some robbery. You caused the pier attacks. Why? What's your goal?
This one we left. Another pawn covering his tracks. Another pest within the walls of Babylon that is now crumbling. We will rebuild it, starting from the very top.
Now this mystery caller is clearly the one behind both this attack and the one at the pier. But why? As we established before, the pier attack was likely meant to draw attention and throw the city into chaos. But a bank? What purpose does that serve? The caller claims that they plan to rebuild everything, starting from the top. As we'll later learn, the COO here was corrupt and likely skimming money from his clients. We can even find a note that the man wrote before his death, which sheds a bit more light on what the attackers here were trying to accomplish. They always knew. We thought the money made us untouchable. We were fools. Marty bought time, I bought silence. Now, someone else owns both. Whoever finds this, tell Curtis, if he's still alive, it was never about the accounts or the money. It was about burning us all. It seems that this group has a singular goal: to tear down the system. Blowing the bank would have crippled the economy and caused a ripple effect far beyond Los Sueños, but instead, they decided to use it to send a message. Strangely, we also learned that the caller here seems to know Judge personally, though right now, it's unclear how. It's possible that the two crossed paths during the MLO experiment, and if we look around, there's actually some evidence to support that. In a conference room upstairs, there's a laptop that, if activated, changes how the call plays out, and this time, things go much differently.
Curiosity always gets the better of you, David.
What was on that drive? It was automated. I didn't do anything.
But it was your initiative, once again fulfilling everything we hoped for you.
I don't work for you.
You follow blindly. You exist to serve in the same machine as Habit. You just haven't accepted its architecture.
You're manipulating this entire city. How far does this go?
You stand at the precipice of something much larger, and it's already in motion. Destruction and creation are the same act, viewed from opposite ends. You'll see for yourself soon enough.
Now, the tone of this call is much different. The caller uses Judge's real name and seems to toy with him throughout the conversation. Based on what we find on that laptop, it appears Judge may have unknowingly sent bank funds to an offshore account, likely one belonging to this same mysterious caller. More alarmingly, though, the caller hints that there's another plan already in motion, and that Judge will find out what the mysterious group has been planning soon enough. Regardless, though, after reporting the bombs and bringing the situation under control, there isn't much left to see here, and the mission comes to an end. But that calm doesn't last, because just a few hours later, this group attacks again. And this time, Judge and D Platoon would be dispatched to the biggest call of their lives. September 4th, 2028, a new America. Conditions on the streets of Los Sueños have only worsened following the bank mission, and massive riots are continuing to consume the city. The streets are in chaos, and if nothing is done quickly, control could be lost entirely. The situation has grown so severe that the president has deployed the National Guard to restore order, though it'll likely take them hours before they're fully mobilized. In the meantime, the department has fallen under FISA's command, and it's here when we get word about a situation unfolding at Cordova Tower. A large group of unidentified men have forced their way inside. The building, now being used as a city hall and record center, is packed with officials, reporters, and civilians, and it's reported that dozens of them have already been killed. To make matters worse, the building has been rigged with the same HMX explosives and nerve gas that we've seen before, suggesting that the group intends to bring the entire skyscraper down. And if that happens, the result would be catastrophic. With riots raging outside, the death toll could reach into the thousands. Evacuations are currently being planned, but with the streets in chaos, it may be some time before people can get clear. Investigators have linked this group to the one behind the previous two attacks. They simply used Los Navegantes and Black Sentinel to draw the LSPD's attention, and now it seems that this attack was their real objective all along. FISA still isn't sure of who the group is, but what they do know is that they're highly trained and decentralized. And for some reason, they have a specific interest in D Platoon's leader, Judge. In fact, the group even called 911, warning that if anyone besides Judge was deployed, then they'd detonate the entire building. Now, at this point, it's clear to us that this is the MLO, and while they've been operating through proxies and from the shadows for most of the game, this will be the first time that we encounter them directly. So, with that, Judge and D Platoon push through the crowds and make their way into Cordova Tower. The team gets off the elevator at the 19th floor, but luckily for us, we're not the only platoon that's been deployed to this operation. Another SWAT team with the LSPD has been inserted on the 24th floor, and as we make our way up, they'll work their way down and meet us. However, almost immediately upon arrival, things start to go sideways. The MLO had already hacked into the CCTV system, and now they've been tracking LSPD movements throughout the building. We also learned that the other SWAT team inside has lost contact with TALK. We'll hear this play out over an open frequency. And just like that, the other team is wiped out. Before they were killed, it sounded like they managed to locate the explosives, but they didn't have enough time to disarm them, which means now this entire operation falls to us. The fate of everyone inside is in our hands. As we move further through the building, the damage left behind by the MLO becomes clear. Dead sheriff's deputies and spent casings litter the floor. The walls and windows are riddled with gunfire, and we can see where civilians tried and failed to barricade themselves against the attackers. Interestingly, this level also features a museum detailing the history of the building, the city of Los Sueños, and the Cordova family, one of Los Sueños' founding families. But aside from establishing that the Cordovas were corrupt, there isn't much here that directly impacts the story. I'd like to go deeper into the Cordovas and the scandal that brought them down, but this video is already way too long, and that's a rabbit hole for another time. What matters here, though, is this. The family became involved in shady backroom deals, funneling money through shell companies and working with dangerous people. They've also been tied to several current politicians, including the governor and Mayor Echeverria, suggesting that the corruption in this city hasn't gone away, it's just changed hands. Maybe this corruption is why the MLO targeted this building. As we saw in the last mission, they went after a corrupt bank COO. So maybe this is what they meant by rebuilding everything. Maybe they intend to eliminate everyone with even a hint of corruption. However, as noble as that goal might sound, they're still killing hundreds of innocent civilians, people who have nothing to do with any of this. Just remember that these guys are killing families, orphaning children, and committing some of the worst domestic terrorist attacks imaginable. Moving onwards, though, we'll find more of the same on the next floor. Ransacked offices, executed employees, and graffiti of the Mariposa lily painted over the Los Sueños crest. However, it's at this point where we begin to encounter the first MLO members of the game. And as you'd expect, these men are heavily armed. Each of them is wearing full kit with helmets and respirators. But more importantly, they fight differently. These men use tactics that we haven't seen from any of the other enemies in the game, deploying flashbangs and clearing rooms just like our own team does. And while it is interesting to be on the receiving end of this for once, it also makes this level far more brutal. To make matters worse, we'll also encounter members of Black Sentinel, likely hired by the MLO to help secure the building. The presence of Chemical 4L1 is here as well, with canisters and traps scattered all throughout the building. We'll also find that the MLO has set up IR laser detectors, which are completely invisible to the naked eye, and if we trip them, soldiers will immediately converge on our position. To say that this mission is a clusterfuck would be an understatement. It took me dozens upon dozens of tries just to clear the map once. On the third floor, D Platoon will eventually find the mayor's office, with Mayor Echeverria sitting slumped over his desk, shot dead. His room has been ransacked, and the other members of D Platoon mentioned that it looks like the MLO were searching for something, and if we look around long enough, we can eventually find what that is. By activating one of the books on his bookcase, a hidden panic room is revealed, and inside of it, we can find documents detailing the mayor's corruption, implicating both him and Governor Whitfield in fraud. It seems that the MLO intended to execute the mayor and then release this information to the public, showing why they did it. Maybe it was meant to build public support, or more likely, to send a message to anyone else in power. If you are corrupt, you're next. And as it turns out, the mayor wasn't the only target. As we later learned from a TV broadcast, Governor Whitfield's motorcade was hit by an explosion when he was en route to deliver a speech to calm down the city, and he and everyone else in the vehicle are presumed dead. After hearing this, Judge and his team eventually locate the same device the other SWAT unit found, along with their bodies scattered around it. The device appears to be a signal emitter, something that we can hopefully use to stop the explosives from detonating. Once we upload the logs, TOC notifies us that we only have 3 minutes to locate and disarm the detonator before the building explodes. So, we make a mad dash towards the upstairs courtroom, where the remaining MLO forces have now gathered. And as we push up the stairs, TOC delivers even worse news. Cordova isn't the only building rigged to blow. As it turns out, there's an entire network of explosives spread across the city, all tied to this same detonator. The streets are still packed with civilians, and many of the buildings containing these bombs are filled with evacuees. Put simply, if these bombs go off, it'll be one of the worst terrorist attacks in American history, and it all comes down to this final room. Upon breaching the room, we'll find that it is filled to the brim with hostiles, but most importantly, at the far end of the courtroom stands a man wearing a Mariposa lily mask holding a detonator. Now, it is critical here that we don't shoot him, because if he's killed, he'll trigger the device, and every rigged building in the city goes down with him. However, if Judge and his team force him to surrender, he drops the detonator instead, and after securing him and the remaining hostiles, we're left with a choice. Judge can either sever the explosives network through the device on the man's gear, or he can choose to detonate it himself. Now, each option leads to a different ending, but I'm going to start with what I think is the most likely canon outcome: Judge choosing to prevent the detonation. After Judge disables the detonator and he and his team secure the top floor, FISA and other federal agents move into the building to process the suspects and assess what happened. Since this has now become a federal investigation, LSPD and SWAT have no further involvement in detaining those affiliated with the MLO. In fact, most of the members were quickly whisked away by federal agents and became untraceable soon after. Internal documents would go on to show that FISA refused to even name the group responsible for the attacks. Instead, they used vague phrasing like unidentified actors or clandestine cells. LSPD detectives, along with Judge, though, believe that the group has ties to the MLO experiment, and the constant use of the Mariposa Lily in their graffiti and uniforms seems to support that. This group seems to believe that Judge, as a former test subject himself, either belongs with them or already does. But in Judge's own words, whatever they want, they can't have it. The federal government at large seems to be trying to brush these attacks under the rug, as it would be far more convenient if they could pretend that this group never existed. But the media and the public at large aren't letting it go, and they've even given the group a name: the Mariposa Lily Order. So with this, it seems that word of the MLO has finally started to get out, and there's no telling how many of their members are still out there. What could the group be planning next? How far do their tendrils really reach? The questions here begin to eat at Judge, and he starts investigating the connections himself, turning his apartment into a makeshift conspiracy room. At one point, he glances out of his window and thinks that he sees a man watching him, only for it to be a woman shivering out in the cold. Here we can find links to tons of other missions and groups that we've seen throughout the game, but before we can analyze them, a call for assistance comes in over the radio, and Judge runs off into the night. The other ending, though, is far darker. If Judge chooses to activate the detonator, he watches as several of the surrounding buildings collapse around him, presumably killing thousands. For whatever reason, though, it seems that Cordova Tower wasn't linked to this network, though, as the building that Judge is in is still standing. Judge is presumably surrounded by police as soon as they find out what happened, and quickly arrested and sentenced to life in prison. As he sits in a cell, it becomes clear to us that his psyche is deteriorating. Judge talks to himself. He wonders if any of this is even real. But suddenly, a strange man walks into the room, wearing green gloves and a tie.
Mr. Beaumont, a pleasant evening to you. You will never know my name, and no one will believe you if you spoke it. The cameras, the guards, gone. There are no witnesses to our moment. I find it curious how a man such as yourself can emerge unscathed in scenarios where others would break. Within those eyes, I see you've navigated every corridor of your mind, praying and hoping for an exit. Yet, those above you rearrange the holes. And you were made to heal on command, and they called it destiny. Your job, their experiment. There is no map, David. No prophecy, no grand vision for America, only the cartographers. Those who draw the borders of the possible, they craft the reality that surrounds us. The USIA's children of the first and second cohorts worship mere symbols. They are zealots, so crude and yet so graceful. Energies wasted on endless wars, fighting to transmute the ruins of the USIA's failure to build anew. Those puppets that you call the USIA, who merely crunch variables, they try to twist the fabric of reality with tools unworthy of the material they have no right to possess, let alone have access to. Both are bound, enslaved, really, by belief. But you dangle on the precipice of something rarer. What I offer, what we offer, is authorship. To move beyond agency, beyond choice. Freedom. Those faceless flower children, nothing more than mind-broken test subjects meant to absorb you into their collective, whilst the USIA intended to remake you in their own image, and now both are poised to succeed, all depending on who gets there first, of course. I see that their plan is already in bloom. Have I looked in the mirror? If you reject me now, they will lay claim to you. You will be their vessel, David. I did not come here to save nor kill you. I came to ask, are you ready to no longer be?
Yes. Yes, I am.
A wise decision, Mr. Beaumont. Step through with me. There is no light here.
Now, it seems that this man represents another shadow organization, one that operates far above the USIA and the MLO, one that exists above agency, one that offers true freedom. Sympathetic to Judge's situation, he offers him a place within it, or, in his words, a chance to no longer be. And with that, Judge accepts his offer. Now, this group is heavily implied to be the Green Dragon Society. If you can remember from earlier in the video, we've seen hints of them throughout the game. Most notably, though, is in the Clemente Hotel, where influential figures, including US presidents, were tied to the group. The newer DLC even adds in some more subtle references, suggesting that they've been operating behind the scenes here this entire time. There's even a wooden box at the station marked with a green dragon, implying that the groups have had their eyes on Judge for a while now. From what we can gather, though, the Green Dragon Society functions much like the Illuminati, a global secret network pulling the strings of governments and shaping events from the shadows. Now, it's unclear to us why this group decided to choose Judge to join their ranks, or what role he's meant to play for them, but something about him caught this group's attention. And with that, the story ends with Judge stepping into something far bigger than anything we've seen before. Now, after both of these endings, the narrative can feel a lot more complicated than it really is. Over the past few missions, things have escalated quickly, so I just want to briefly go over what we know for certain, just to make sure that you guys walk away from this video with a clear idea of what happened in the story. So first, Judge used to be a SWAT officer with the Chicago Police Department. During a call that went wrong, he was seriously injured and the rest of his team got killed. And in the aftermath, he was left dealing with severe PTSD and survivor's guilt. His wife, Elizabeth, who was likely connected to the USIA, encouraged Judge to go to Nevada to find himself, before leaving him and taking their kids with her. Now alone and desperate, Judge takes her advice and heads to Nevada. There he encounters USIA agent Evan Brody, a former platoon leader of his. Though at the time, Judge doesn't really have any idea of who this guy is really working for. Now, it's implied that this is the point where Judge becomes a test subject for the USIA, likely taken in by Brody and subjected to experimental drugs as a part of the MLO program. Because of this, Judge has little to no memory of his time in Nevada, suggesting that the USIA intentionally wiped or altered it. Afterwards, the USIA places Judge within the LSPD to observe the results, to see if their experiment worked, and his time in Los Sueños becomes a part of that test. While the USIA isn't directly orchestrating every event in the city, they appear to be allowing certain groups to operate unchecked, letting Los Sueños spiral into chaos to see how someone like Judge responds to it. Throughout his missions, Judge encounters some former USIA operatives who try to warn him about what's really going on, but because of the circumstances and his missing memory, he never fully puts it together. Eventually, another group of USIA test subjects, the Mariposa Lily Order, become aware of Judge and attempt to bring him into their ranks. Their goal seems to be dismantling the system that created them, and since Los Sueños appears to be one of the USIA's primary testing grounds, they decide to start there. The MLO orchestrates a series of horrific attacks that brings the city to its knees, and in the end, Judge is faced with a choice. He can either accept what he was turned into and become another faceless killing machine, or reject it and continue fighting for his own beliefs and values. And personally, I like to think that he chose the latter. The game of Ready or Not is such a crazy and wild ride that I don't think you would ever expect to see when you first start it. What starts as a simple raid at a gas station eventually swirls into one of the most intense government conspiracies that I've ever seen, and I'm really excited to see where Void decides to take it from here. I remember that feeling that I had when I first started playing the game, of just being an anxious ball of excitement. And being able to have that feeling with the new DLC with over 1,000 hours of game time is insane to me. Now, the future of Ready or Not is pretty unclear right now, as we don't know if there's going to be any new DLCs after this. But in any case, I just wanted to say that this game has meant a lot to me, and I'm really grateful to have been a part of it. Anyways, though, thank you guys so much for your support with this series over the past few years, and thank you for spending your time with me here today. As always, you know I love you. I'm out.